Good morning, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. This is the Fila Maestras River along the Fila Trail. It's in Fecundia Notch State Park in New Hampshire, central New Hampshire, on the way into White Mountain National Forest, which is heading east. And today we're going to discuss Anaximander, who is one of the Presocratic philosophers and the successor to Thales of Miletus that we discussed last time, who even Aristotle claimed was the father of Western philosophy. Now, in my mind, a lot of these guys, including Aristotle, I get the feeling that, like today, Aristotle was like the name of the professor in a lab who got to put his name on the papers. So again, Thales was the professor of the school in Miletus, which was a prosperous trading city in the early classical period, maybe even late archaic, and it was kind of the predecessor to the school that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle end up coming from. And these guys. So after Thales, Anaximander comes onto the scene, circa 610 to 546 BCE in Miletus of Ionia, which is present-day Turkey. Again, most of the Presocratic philosophers, Aristotle claims that what they did was they looked for the like what is matter, basically, like what is the originating principle of what is the world actually made of. But more than the ideas they came up with, because Thales, if we remember, believed that water was the originating principle, was the way that they came up with their ideas, which was kind of like the precursor to our scientific method that we use today. So as a member of the Milesian school of Presocratic thinkers, he absorbed the teachings of Thales, and after Thales was out of the picture, Anaximander overtook his position at the institute there in Miletus, and went on to teach Anaximenes and Pythagoras, among other major pre-Socratic thinkers. Unfortunately, because of how long ago this stuff was, we possess few extant writing samples from Anaximander directly, but Horatio claims he was the first philosopher to write down his ideas in the book Themistus. And that's kind of how it goes. We get doxographers, people who like record names and dates and like official records from back then. And we also have some correspondence between philosophers, like Aristotle mentioned Anaximander, but we don't have a ton of writings from the dude directly. Now, portraits of the man, and when I say portraits, I mean like intellectual and physical portraits of the man, have been created using references to him from other sources of the era, indicating that he at least had a widespread impact. The fact that so many different people mention him from back then means that he was known about it at the very least. And back then they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have TV even. So to be known across like the Greek world was a much bigger feat than it would be today. And similar to Thales, Anaximander is remembered for creating a new rational or scientific, I think rational is a better approach rational approach to problems. In particular, he made an accurate world map and attempted to map celestial bodies mathematically. So again, the Presocratic thinkers kind of are in Western history, they mark like the transition from when we used myths and gods to explain natural phenomenon to really starting to ask what's the rational explanation for these things. And that really lays the foundation for all of Western society today. Now, Anaximander believed that everything was made of four elements, which was common at the time: fire, water, wind, and earth. However, he did introduce the concept of the Aperion, or infinite. In some way, this reminds me of the concept of the aether, which is like this formless void. So for Anaximander, the Aperion was the originating principle. Everything kind of comes out of the void. And Aristotle mentions this in his book Metaphysics, that the Presocratics were searching for the source of all things, and that's what Anaximander thought the source of everything was. Theophrastus, which is Anaximander's pupil, eventually comments that Anaximander, quoting, of Miletus, son of Praxeades, a fellow citizen and associate of Thales, said the material cause and first element of things was the infinite, or Aperion. He said it is neither water nor any of the other so-called elements, but a substance different from them, which is infinite, Aperion. And that right there is from Theophrastus, who is his pupil that takes over the school after he is gone, or after Anaximander leaves. Thales and Anaximenes believed that air and water were the first principle of things respectively. This is the major difference between most of the Presocratic thinkers. Anaximander thought that there was an eternal, the indestructible, something out of which everything arises and into which everything returns. So again, there's some really reminiscent, very reminiscent to the concept of the aether. He also believed that he was one of the first Greek thinkers to really conceptualize a mechanical model of the universe, with the Earth floating in the infinite, or Aperion. And what's significant about this is, as historian Karl Popper mentions, it's one of the boldest and most revolutionary and most portentous ideas in the whole of human history of thinking. And it's because Anaximander is one of the first men in recorded history to put the Earth on not on anything. So, for example, Native Americans, they believed that the Earth was like in a void, but it was on top of turtles' backs. Most other, he was the first one to really just say that the Earth could be just, it didn't have to be on top of anything. Anyways, at the time, that was a revolutionary idea, which tells us a lot about what was revolutionary back then. Adius describes Anaximander's advanced, sophisticated cosmology, and then Anaximander also described the sun as a distant mass. So he actually imagined the sun as an object. He's one of the first people to think of the sun as being an object. Again, tells us what was revolutionary at ancient Greek times. And he also kind of used math to postulate how far away the Earth might be from it. And he believed that celestial bodies can revolve at different rates, that they weren't fixed on spheres or anything like that in the sky. He also started trying to explain things like thunder and lightning. He said that thunder was caused by clouds running into one another, and that he basically said that, you know, if there was thunder but no lightning, that the clouds had enough energy to make a noise, but you couldn't see it. And he created a system for these things. A few hundred years later, 3rd century Roman writer reports that Anaximander of Miletus considered that from life forms from warmed up water emerged from warmed up water and earth emerged fish, or entirely fish-like animals. Inside these animals, men took form and embryos were held prisoners until puberty. Only then, after these animals burst open, could men and women come out now able to feed themselves. So at least according to a anonymous 3rd century Roman writer, Anaximander had a kind of a precursor to the evolutionary theory. He believed that all life forms originated from the ocean. And Anaximander also maintained that whenever we die, everything returns to the Aperion, which is the infinite. Strabo and Anaximenes purport that Anaximander's world map was the first published of its kind. And Strabo and Anaximenes are some classical era geographers that are very well known if you're into cartography or geography in any way. So creating a map like this gave the Miletians an advantage in diplomatic negotiations, and supposedly the original map was drawn on a rounded sphere. Yeah, so Anaximander was also a diplomat and stuff, and he supposedly built a map, and he did it at the time very accurately. Instead of just having small maps of individual places or cities, he did like the whole Greek world, and he did it by placing the thing that he drew the map on a rounded metal object, and that gave it the curvature of the sea. And so he was able to use it as a diplomat to be more successful in trading negotiations, because he could send ships more accurately to faraway places. He used other geometric or mathematic concepts, and he helped to popularize some of Egypt's geometry in the Greek world. He also posited he came up with the idea that there was multiple universes, basically. As opposed to Plato and Aristotle, who believed that there's a static world, he believed that there were multiple universes, or that they came into and out of existence, and they may even like cause each other. He had a lot of very sophisticated ideas. Again, I'm probably not doing them all justice, But although he was popular, and this is the end, although he was popular during his time, by the time of Plato, which is only a few hundred years later, his work would be mostly forgotten. However, the influence of his ideas and way of thinking continues to be felt even today. Again, he represents a very strong point in history where mankind as a whole, at least in the West, Western thought, was shifting away from mythical explanations and towards rational and what would become scientific explanations for natural phenomenon. He helped to develop the whole idea of scientific ideas and that we could test our thoughts with geometry. He came up with the Aperion. Again, this right here is not a true thing, but the way that he explored these ideas was systematic, and it's hard not to see the almost the pseudo-scientific way that he approached it. At the time, there was no science, so he had nothing to base it off of. He also did very great map-making things. Geometry, a combination of ideas. Similar, man, at this point in time in history, the people who end up making an impact often make contributions, like Aristotle or Plato, to multiple realms of thought. And part of me thinks it's just because mankind was just starting to grasp these fundamental concepts and play around with them, basically. And so there was just a ton to be discovered. Nowadays, but again, I also kind of believe that Aristotle and even Anaximander and Thales, these men were basically the professors of their time who got to stick their name on everything that came out of their schools. So when you're talking about things 3,000 years ago, it's hard to know for sure. New Hampshire's been very cool. This park right here is along the edge of this river, but it's also near mountains, and that's the interstate right there. And so for several miles, there's all these exits that you can just pull off the interstate, no money involved, and you can go hike. There's awesome spots. Gotten plenty of it done today. Yesterday, I summited Camel Hump Mountain. I think that's the name. Maybe it was Dunbar Mountain. I forget. In Vermont. 13 miles round trip over 370 flights. That was brutal. I don't think I don't want to hike that much again today. But it's fairly early, so I'm gonna I think I've got 5 miles in. And again, whenever we're talking about these pre-Socratic thinkers, a lot of it's not so much that these guys came up with revolutionary ideas, although they did come up with revolutionary ideas at the time. It was more that they are the first recorded people in the West that started to explore things from a different perspective instead of using religion or myth to explain natural phenomenon at the very least. And again, I'm totally faith supportive. I support faith. But whenever we look at the history of scientific ideas, it's hard for us often to imagine that people didn't ever think rationally or did not ever think with a scientific lens. But at one point in time, there was no science to look at, and so these our intellectual forebears really did pave the way for us and made it possible for all of the great thinkers in history that we talk about all the time to make the contributions that they have to our society, species, and civilization. So this is a wandering author here, coming at you from New Hampshire in Fauquilia Notch State Park along Interstate I-84, I-89, heading east. Reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. What are you guys doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. And you can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.